My name was in her ledger, not the staff log, the private one, the cream leather book where Ondine Sarraut wrote down the things she meant to keep. I was 25, hired 3 weeks earlier to catalog a dead collector's estate, and I had just found myself written there, between a Klimt study and a sapphire the size of my thumb. I remember the cold of the gallery, the rain on the tall windows, the sound of her heels stopping just behind me. She reached past me and turned the page, slow, like she had all the time in the world. "You weren't meant to see that," she said, then softer, "but now you can't unsee it." Before I continue, if you enjoyed the story, I share lots of steamy, uncensored stories on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description. Details are in the description and comments. Be careful, it's very, very hot inside. Let me back up. Before the ledger, before any of it, I was just the girl they hired to put a dead woman's life in order. My name is Tessa Marlowe. I catalog things. Paintings, jewelry, letters, the small, careful evidence people leave behind. I write it all down before I let myself feel anything about it. It is a useful habit when you spend your days inside other people's grief. You learn to hold a thing at arm's length, name it, file it, and move on before it can reach you. I told myself that habit would keep me safe in that house too. I want you to remember that I believed it, because I have rarely been so completely, so beautifully wrong. I carried one thing from job to job, a chipped blue enamel cup, my mother's, the handle worn pail where her thumb used to rest. I am not a sentimental person. I have given away almost everything else. But that cup sat on every desk I ever worked at. And at night, when the houses went quiet and I was alone with someone else's treasures, I would hold it and remember that I had once belonged to somebody in a small kitchen a long time ago. I tell you this now because the cup matters later. Everything small in this story matters later. That is the thing about being a person who notices. You collect the details before you understand what they will come to mean. The estate belonged to Margarethe Sarraut, who had died in the spring at 91. She had spent 70 years buying beautiful things and letting almost no one see them. The first time the doors opened for me, I stood in the entrance hall and forgot, briefly, how to breathe. 40 rooms, paintings stacked 3 deep against the walls, a marble gallery on the top floor with windows so tall, the rain looked like it was falling inside the house. I had cataloged grand homes before. Bankers' widows, a faded film star, a shipping family with more Rembrandts than sense. I had never once walked into a house and felt that the house was waiting for me. I told myself it was the jet lag. It was not the jet lag. The housekeeper was a small, iron-haired woman named Pernille, who had served Margarethe for 40 years and trusted me with exactly nothing. She showed me the rules on the first morning. I could go anywhere on the top 3 floors. I was never to open the locked cabinet in the gallery. And under no circumstances, she said, was I to be in the gallery after dark unless the lady of the house was with me. I asked her why. She looked at me a long moment, the way old servants look at you when they have decided how much you can be told. "The lady prefers it," she said. And then, lower, almost to herself, "The lady prefers a great many things you will not understand for a while." I wrote the rules down. I did not write down the way my skin had prickled. I should have. I met Ondine Sarraut on the second day, Margarethe's grandniece, the one who had inherited everything and seemed to want none of it, except, I would learn, the parts that could not be inherited at all. She was 34 and she moved through that enormous house the way a blade moves through water. No wasted motion, no sound she did not choose to make. Sleek black hair, a pale, still face that gave nothing away, and an old gold signet ring on her right hand that she touched with her thumb whenever she was deciding something. She touched it once in the doorway of the gallery, while she looked at me. I did not know yet that the gesture meant she had made up her mind. About what, it would take me weeks to understand. By then it was far too late to mind. She asked me how long the work would take. I said 3 months, perhaps 4. She said, "Take 6. She said it without looking up from the painting she was studying. And something in the way she said it made it plain that it was not about the art at all. I should have heard the warning folded inside it. Instead, I heard only the strange, dangerous comfort of being wanted somewhere. Even if only for my handwriting, my crates, my careful little lists. I had been alone a long time. And that is the thing nobody warns you about women like Ondine Sarraut. They do not begin with your heart. They begin with your loneliness. They find it before you have finished introducing yourself. And they are unhurried. And they are patient. And they wait. The work, at least, I understood. I am good at it. I came in each morning at 8 and I built the world of that collection one card at a time. Provenance, dimensions, condition, the little histories that ride along behind beautiful objects like a wake behind a boat. And because I noticed things, I began, without meaning to catalog her too. The watch she wore on her left wrist, older than she was, the glass scratched. The way she took her coffee black and never finished it. The fact that she read standing up always as if sitting down were a concession she refused to make. I told myself I was only being thorough. I have never been a good liar. Least of all to myself, and never it turned out to her. On the 4th day, something small happened. I came back from lunch and someone had filled my chipped blue cup with fresh coffee and set it back exactly where I leave it. Handle turned to the right, the way I always turn it. No note. I stood there holding it like evidence. I asked Pernilla. She said no one was permitted in the gallery but me and the lady of the house. I asked the lady of the house. Ondine looked at me for a moment that went on a little too long, and then she said, "You turn the handle to the right," as if that were an answer. As if she had simply observed a fact about me and quietly corrected the universe to match it. I did not sleep well that night. Not from fear. That was the trouble. Not from fear at all. After that, there was a green velvet chair by the tall windows, and most afternoons at 4 o'clock she came and sat in it. She did not talk much. She read or she watched the rain, or she watched me, which I pretended not to notice and noticed completely. The room changed when she was in it. The air seemed to lean. I would catch the scent of her, something cold and green, cedar and rain, and lose my place in my own careful lists. I have spent my life keeping things at arm's length. I did not know until that green chair how badly a person can want to put the arm down. There was a smile she had, if you could call it that. A single millimeter at the corner of her mouth, no more, that appeared maybe twice a day, and only ever when she thought no one was looking. I began to live for that millimeter. I am not proud of it. I would say something a little dry, a little careful, just to see if I could earn it. And when it came, that almost nothing, that fraction of warmth on that cold, still face, I felt it land somewhere under my ribs with a weight that no honest object in that whole priceless collection ever managed. Why was she being kind to me? I asked myself that over and over in those weeks. I had the question exactly backwards. The question was never why. The question was how long she had already been kind before I noticed. Then Camille Roux came, and I learned that Ondine had a rival. Camille owned the great gallery across the river. Copper hair, emerald silk. A warmth that filled a room the exact way Ondine's silence emptied one. She had wanted Margarethe's collection for 20 years. At the memorial dinner, she found me by the wine and asked me 3 questions about myself before she asked a single one about the art. And I felt distinctly the sensation of being appraised by an expert. She was lovely, she was clever, and when she laughed and touched my wrist, I saw, across the long candlelit room, Ondine go very still. Her thumb moved once against her ring. Camille saw it too. She smiled at Ondine the way a woman smiles when she lays down the first card of a long game she fully intends to win. I want to say something first before I tell you the rest. I was not a fool. I knew what it looked like. The lonely girl, the cold heiress, the rival circling. I had cataloged enough rich people's lives to know that I was, by every sensible measure, a small temporary fixture in a very large permanent world. I told myself that nightly, like a prayer against hoping. And every morning I came back, and the cup was full, and the green chair filled at 4, and the millimeter came when I earned it. And the prayer got a little quieter, and the hope got a little louder, until one Tuesday in the gallery it stopped being a question of whether I had fallen, and became only the question of how far and how hard, and whether there was any floor at all. If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe so the next one can find you. Stay close. It happened on a Tuesday, 3 weeks in. I was reconciling the jewelry inventory against Margarette's private records when I found it. A cream leather book, tucked behind a false panel in the back of the gallery desk. Not a catalog. A ledger of intentions in Ondine's own narrow hand. The things she meant to keep. A particular small vermeer. Her grandmother's ring. A house in the south with olive trees. I turned the pages the way you turn pages you already know you should not be reading, and near the bottom of the most recent one, written in the same calm, careful hand as the vermeer in the ring and the house, I found 3 words. The new cataloger. My title. My place. Filed between a Klimt study and a sapphire the size of my thumb, as if I were simply one more beautiful thing she had decided not to let go of. I did not hear her come in. I never did. The sound of her heels stopped just behind me, and the whole gallery seemed to hold its breath along with me. She reached past my shoulder and turned the page, slow, unhurried, like she had all the time in the world. You weren't meant to see that, she said. There was no apology in it. Only patience. I asked her what it meant, and my voice did not come out as steady as I wanted. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said the thing I have not been able to put down since. It means I noticed you before you noticed yourself, she said, and I have never in my life been good at letting a noticed thing go. Outside, the rain came down harder. Neither of us moved to turn on a light. We talked until the rain stopped, which is to say we talked for hours. Not the way I had braced for, no demand, no threat, no velvet trap closing. Only the truth laid flat between us on the desk, like an object to be cataloged. She had read every catalog I had ever published. She had asked the estate for me by name. The 6 months were never about the art. I should have been afraid, and some small, honest part of me was. But here's the thing I had never said out loud to anyone, and somehow said to her in the dark, over a dead woman's jewels. I have spent my whole life writing down the things other people decided to keep, and not once, not one single time, had anyone ever decided to keep me. So I did not run, I set my terms instead. If I stay, I told her, I stay as a person, not an entry in a book, not a thing you keep on a high shelf and admire in good light. If you want me in that ledger, I want to be the one who decides to be there. She looked at me for a long, long moment, the kind of look that rearranges the furniture in a room without anyone touching it. And then she did something I had never seen her do. She closed the ledger. She set her hand flat on the cover, the signet ring catching the last gray light, and she said only my name. Tessa, not the new cataloger, not the girl they hired. Tessa, you. I said, okay. She said okay. And that small, ridiculous exchange of two okays was, I understand now, the most reckless promise I have ever made. The first week after that passed in a strange, suspended quiet. The way a house feels when something has been decided but not yet said aloud. We kept our distance. 8 careful inches of it, across desks and doorways and the long marble length of the gallery. But the rule had changed shape. Before, the distance had been a wall. Now, it was a held breath. She still came at 4. She still read standing up. But sometimes I would look up and find her already looking. And neither of us would glance away as fast as two strangers should. And the air between us would go taut as a wire and stay that way until one of us, usually me, said something foolish about provenance to make it bearable again. I learned her late-night self that month. When she stayed past 9, helping me with the heavy frames she did not trust the movers to touch, she would pull her black hair up and pin it with a small tortoiseshell clip, and something in her face would loosen by a single degree. I added the clip to my private catalog. I was up to a dozen entries by then, all of them hers. The watch, the black coffee she never finished, the cedar and rain of her, the way she said my name like it cost her something. I told myself a person could notice all of that and still be safe. I was building very carefully a complete and detailed inventory of exactly how I was going to get my heart broken. Once handing her an index card, my fingers brushed hers and we both stopped. Just stopped. The card suspended between us, her thumb a breath from mine. It would have been the easiest thing in the world to close that last small distance. I felt her decide not to. I felt myself decide not to. We let the card pass, careful as customs officers, and she turned back to the painting and I turned back to my desk, and the whole room rang like a struck glass for an hour afterward. That was the engine of those weeks. Not what we did, what we held ourselves back from doing. I have never wanted anything the way I wanted the things we kept refusing each other in that gallery. Pernille saw it before either of us said a word. The old housekeeper found me in the kitchen one morning and set a cup of tea in front of me without being asked, which from her was practically a confession of love. She has not sat in that green chair in 9 years, Pernille said, not looking at me. Not since the last one. I asked carefully what happened to the last one. Pernille was quiet a while. She was sent away, she said at last, by people who decided the lady could not be allowed to keep her. The lady was 19. She has been collecting things she is permitted to keep ever since. Then she looked at me, hard, the way you look at someone you have decided to warn exactly once. Do not be a thing she is permitted to keep, she said. Be the thing she is not. On the 4th night of that week, she came back late and soaked through. There had been a board dinner, some war over Margarethe's foundation, and she came up the stairs into the gallery with her hair dripping and her composure for once a half-second behind her. And she stopped when she saw me still at my desk. You're still here, she said. I said the frames don't move themselves. She crossed the room and sat, not in the green chair, but on the edge of my desk, close, the rain coming off her in the lamplight, and for a moment she was not the coldest woman in the city. She was just tired, and 34, and looking at me like I was the only warm thing in a very large cold house. I gave her my chipped blue cup, full of the bad coffee I keep going at night. She drank from it without a word, from the worn place where my mother's thumb used to rest. What happened next was very small. I reached past her for a canvas on the high shelf and lost my balance, and she came off that desk faster than I have ever seen her move and caught my arm. Just my arm. Her hand at my elbow, steady, certain. The wet of her sleeve soaking warm through mine. We stood like that a moment too long. I could have stepped back. She could have let go. Neither of us did. and neither of us did the other the disrespect of pretending we hadn't noticed. Her eyes went once to my mouth, mine went to hers. The rain was very loud, and then she released me exactly as carefully as she had caught me, and said in a voice with the smallest possible crack in it, "Not yet." I did not ask not yet what. I already knew, we both did, not yet. I built the next days around those two words like scaffolding around a cathedral. Not no, not never, not yet, which is a promise wearing the coat of a refusal. And we both knew it, and we both, God help us, decided to honor the coat. I think now that the waiting was its own kind of language between us. She had spent her life having beautiful things taken the moment she let them be seen wanting. I had spent mine being no one's first choice. Of course we were slow. We were two people who had each learned the hard way that the surest path to losing a thing is to reach for it too fast. So we did not reach. We held the 8 inches like something sacred. And every single day, the 8 inches got heavier. Camille came back on a Thursday, and this time she did not bother with the art at all. She found me alone in the gallery and she made me an offer. Twice the salary, my own department, my name on a door across the river. She was warm and she was generous, and she meant every word. And then, lower, she made the real offer, the one underneath. "Come work for me, Tessa," she said, "and you will never be a line in anyone's ledger again. You will be the one holding the pen." It was, I will admit, a beautiful thing to be told. She had found the oldest wound in me and pressed her thumb to it, gently, the way only a clever and dangerous woman can. A month before, it might have worked. But a month before, no one had ever said my name like it cost them something. I told Camille no. And I made the mistake, I see it clearly now, of being kind about it. I thanked her. I told her she was generous, that I was honored, that my work here was simply not finished. I gave her grace because I had it to give, and I did not understand yet that to a woman like Camille Roux, kindness is not an answer. It is a door left unlocked. She smiled at my refusal the way she had smiled at Ondine across the memorial table. "Of course," she said. "Of course. Finish your work." And she touched my wrist one last time, light as a price tag, and she left. And I stood in the gallery feeling distinctly that I had not won anything at all. I had only postponed something. I was right. That night, Ondine told me about the last one. Not because I asked, because I told her about Camille's offer, and something in her went carefully, dangerously still. And then instead of the cold thing I braced for, she gave me the truth. Her name was Lisa, she said. We were 19. My grandmother decided a Sarraut could not keep a music teacher's daughter, and so she did not let me. I have spent 15 years learning to want only what I am allowed to want. She looked at me then across the green chair, and the millimeter at the corner of her mouth was gone, and in its place was something I had never seen on her face. Fear. "You are not something I am allowed to want, Tessa," she said. "That is precisely the problem. And it is the first true thing I've let myself feel since I was 19 years old." After that, the house felt different. Warmer and more dangerous at once, the way a frozen river feels in the first thaw. She let me see small things. She cooked once, badly, a pasta she burned while arguing with me about whether a forgery can be beautiful. And we ate it anyway at the kitchen table at midnight. And it was, I think, the happiest meal of my life. She fell asleep in the green chair one rainy afternoon, and I sat very still and catalogued the way her face looked with all the cold finally off it, and did not write a single word down, because some things you are not supposed to file. You are only supposed to keep. I was learning her language by then. The language was made entirely of things we did not yet allow ourselves to say. There were 2 cups at my desk now. She had brought one of her own, plain white, expensive, nothing like my chipped blue one, and left it there without comment. And every night we drank the bad coffee side by side at the window and watched the rain and did not touch. It is a strange thing to be that happy and that unfinished at the same time. I caught myself more than once wishing the cataloging would never end, because the cataloging was the reason I was allowed to stay. And I had begun to be terrified of the day I would write the final card and have no more reason left. I should have known. The thing that ends a story like this is never the running out of reasons. It is always, always someone else's hand reaching in. By the second month, I had started deliberately to work slower. I am not proud of that either. The cataloging was the reason I was permitted to be there. And so I let it stretch, let it sprawl, found reasons to re-examine a provenance I had already settled, because every finished card was a step closer to the morning. I would have no more reason to climb those stairs at 8. She knew. Of course she knew. She watched me remeasure a frame I had measured in March, and she said nothing. Only the millimeter came and went at the corner of her mouth. And I understood that we were both, in our separate careful ways, lying to a clock. Summer turned the rain warm, the gallery filled with green afternoon light. And the two of us went on pretending the work was the thing keeping me there, when we both knew, by then, exactly what was. She wore thin white cotton gloves when she handled the art herself, and I could have watched her hands all day. There was a reverence in them I have only ever seen in people who have lost something and decided never to be careless again. She would lift a small panel as if it were a sleeping animal, turn it to the light, read the brushwork with her fingertips through the cotton. I added it to the catalog in my head. The gloves, the reverence. The way she touched everything in that house as though it might be taken from her at any moment, which I was beginning to understand, was simply the only way she knew how to touch anything at all. I wondered, more than I should have, what it would be to be touched like that. Like something she had decided finally not to be careless with. Some evenings she played a record. An old one, a woman singing in French, the needle hissing in the worn grooves. The first time, I went still at my desk, and she saw me listening, and she did not turn it off the way I half expected. She let it play. The music filled the marble room and softened all its hard edges, and for the length of one song, we simply existed in the same warm pool of sound, 8 feet apart, neither of us working, neither of us speaking. When it ended, she lifted the needle and said, "My grandmother played this for the music teacher's daughter, the summer before they sent her away." Then she put on the other side, and we did not speak of it again. But I understood she had just shown me a wound on purpose. People do not do that unless they have started to hope you might be the one who does not press on it. It rained the day we walked to the foundation office, and there was one umbrella between us. She held it. I walked close. Our shoulders touched the whole way, through the wet gray streets, and neither of us moved apart, and neither of us mentioned it, and it was the most I had touched another human being in 3 years. Halfway there, a car went through a puddle, and she turned without thinking and put herself between me and the spray and got her whole left side soaked for the trouble. And when I started to apologize, she just looked at me, rain on her face, and said, "It is only water, Tessa," as if there were a category of things she would gladly ruin for me and water was merely the cheapest of them. I have thought about that sentence more than I have thought about almost anything anyone has ever said to me. She showed me Margarethe's private rooms in the 3rd month, the ones even Pernille kept closed. And there, in a small study that smelled of dust and old roses, was the locked cabinet I had been forbidden to open. She unlocked it while I watched. Inside there were no paintings, only letters. Decades of them tied in faded ribbon in 2 different hands. My grandmother and the music teacher's daughter wrote to each other for 40 years, Ondine said. After they were parted, they were never permitted to be together. They were only permitted to write. She kept every letter and showed no one, and she died alone in a house full of beautiful things she was allowed to keep. Ondine closed the cabinet. This is the inheritance, she said, not the art. This. The Sarraut women have always been very good at wanting and very bad at being allowed. Camille found me again, away from the house this time. A lunch across the river, all white linen and easy laughter, and she was so warm and so clever that it took me until the coffee to feel the knife slide in. She collects, you know, Camille said lightly, stirring her cup. Ondine, it is what the Sarraut women do. They find a beautiful thing. They study it until they understand it completely, and then, she shrugged, elegant, merciless, then they have understood it, and they return it to the shelf. I only say it because I would hate to see you cataloged, darling. You are far too interesting to end up as an entry. She smiled. She paid for lunch, and she left me sitting there with a small, cold seed of doubt she had planted very precisely in the one patch of ground where she knew it would grow. The seed grew the way she meant it to. That night I could not sleep. I lay in my small room at the top of the house and I thought about the ledger, about being written between a Klimt and a sapphire, about all the ways a woman who has spent her life learning to want only what she may keep might mistake a careful study for a feeling. What if Camille was right? What if I was simply the most interesting object in a house that had run out of paintings to understand? I got up at 3 and went down to the dark gallery and stood in front of the green chair and asked the empty room the question I was too afraid to ask the woman herself. Was I a person to her or only the finest thing left to catalog? The room did not answer. The rain had started again. I did not hear her come in. I never did. She was in the doorway in her dressing gown, her black hair down for the first time I had ever seen it. And she looked at me standing there in front of her empty chair at 3 in the morning, and she understood everything, the way she always did. You had lunch with Camille, she said. It was not a question. I said yes. I said, she told me you collect things. She told me you study them until you understand them and then you put them back. Ondine crossed the dark room slowly. She did not touch me. She stopped close, the rain loud, and she said very quietly, I have understood you completely for 2 months, Tessa. I understood you the day you turned the cup handle to the right. Understanding you is not the part I am afraid of. And then she said the truest thing anyone has ever said to me. The part I am afraid of is that I understood you completely and wanted you anyway, and that has never once happened to me before in my life. There was a foundation gala in the autumn and she asked me to come, not as the cataloger, as her guest. Pernilla found me a dress, deep gray silk that had belonged to no one, bought new, which from this household was its own kind of statement. And when I came down the great staircase, Ondine was waiting at the bottom in black, and she looked up at me. And for 1 full second, the coldest woman in the city forgot to arrange her face. The millimeter was not a millimeter. It was a whole unguarded thing, there and gone, but I saw it. I had spent months learning to read a face built specifically so it could not be read, and in that 1 second on the staircase, I read it completely. And what it said, plainly, helplessly, was, oh, just that. Oh. There you are. At the gala, a man tried his luck with me. A collector, rich, pleasant enough. The kind of man accustomed to easy yeses. He brought me a glass of champagne I had not asked for and stood a little too close. And across the crowded ballroom I felt, more than saw, Ondine turn. She crossed that entire room without appearing to hurry. She did not raise her voice. She simply arrived at my side, slid her hand to the small of my back, the first time she had ever touched me in front of another living soul. and said to the man pleasantly, "She is with me." 2 words. The man understood them. Everyone within earshot understood them. And I understood that the woman who had spent 15 years refusing to let herself be seen, wanting anything, had just, in a room full of the most gossiping mouths in the city, decided to be seen wanting me. We did not speak much in the car home. The city slid past wet and gold outside the windows, and she sat close, and her hand found mine on the seat between us and held it, openly, the whole way, her thumb moving slow across my knuckles the way it moved across her ring when she was deciding something. I thought she was deciding something. I think now she had already decided, on the staircase, in the ballroom, and the slow stroke of her thumb was not deliberation at all, but simply the nearest she could come to saying a thing she did not yet have the words for. When the car stopped outside the house, she did not get out right away. She sat in the dark and looked at our 2 hands and said, almost to herself, "I gave Lisa up because I was told to. I will not be told to about you." And then she let go and opened the door, and the knot yet between us had gone so thin you could have read a letter through it. There is a scar across the back of her left hand, thin and old. I had cataloged it months before without knowing its story. She told me one night, both of us tired, the bad coffee gone cold. "I was 19, she said, the day they sent Lisa away. I put my hand through a window. It is the only time in my life I have ever let anyone see exactly how much I wanted something." She turned the hand over in the lamplight, studying the old white line as if it belonged to a stranger. "I promised myself I would never do that again," she said. "Never let it show. Never let them see the wanting, because the wanting is the handle they grab you by." And then she looked up at me and she said, "You have undone 15 years of a very disciplined promise, Tessa Marlowe, and I find I do not even mind." Pernille stopped me in the kitchen near the end of that month. She did not set down tea this time. She just looked at me a long while, the old iron-haired woman who had served 3 generations of Sarraut women, learning to swallow what they wanted. And she said, "She sang this morning." I asked what she meant. "In the bath," Pernille said. "The lady was singing. I have worked in this house for 40 years and I have never once heard her sing." Then she turned back to her bread and over her shoulder, gruff, like it was being dragged out of her, she said the thing that I think I had been waiting the whole story to hear from someone who had earned the right to say it. "Whatever you're doing, girl, do not stop. She has been cold so long I thought it had gone all the way through. You are proof it did not." I caught a fever in November and could not climb the stairs. And Ondine Sarraut, heir to one of the great fortunes of the city, brought me soup she had clearly never made before, and sat on the edge of my narrow bed in the servants' floor, and did it all wrong, beautifully wrong. She did not know how to plump a pillow. She held the back of her gloved hand to my forehead, like she had seen it done in a film. She read to me from a catalog of Dutch masters because it was the only book in the room, in her low, even voice, until I fell asleep. And when I woke in the dark, she was still there, asleep herself in the hard chair, her hand resting on the blanket beside mine, not holding it, just near it, just close, as if even unconscious she could not quite make herself cross the last small distance without my leave. She laughed once, fully, the week I got better. I had said something. I do not even remember what. Something dry about a forged Vermeer with the wrong kind of light in its window. And it caught her off guard. And the laugh came up out of her before she could stop it, real and warm and astonished, like a sound she had forgotten her body could make. She put her gloved hand over her own mouth as if to catch it, and put it back. Too late. I had heard it. And I understood, standing there in that green afternoon light, that I had gone somewhere past the reach of caution. I was not falling anymore. I had fallen. I had hit the bottom of it and found, to my complete undoing, that there was no floor down there at all. Only her, only this. Only the terrible, permanent fact of loving Ondine Sarraut, which I would not have undone for anything in that priceless, emptying house. We came very close one evening at the door of the small study. Close enough that I felt her breath, close enough that her gloved hand came up to my jaw and stopped there, trembling very slightly, the most uncertain I had ever seen those certain hands. And then the telephone rang in the hall, sharp, insistent, the world reaching in the way the world always does. And she closed her eyes and pressed her forehead to mine for 1 single second and breathed, "Not yet," again. Except this time the words came out frayed, almost a plea, almost an apology. "Soon," she added, which she had never said before. "Soon, Tessa. I am nearly brave enough." I did not know that night what she was waiting to be brave enough for. I know now, she was waiting to have nothing left to lose me to. She was about to make very certain of it. I decided that week that I would be the one to say it. I was tired of not yet. I had spent my whole life letting other people decide whether I was worth keeping, and I did not want to do that anymore. Not with her, not with this. So I made up my mind. I would tell Ondine Sarraut that I loved her, plainly, first, before she could be brave enough or afraid enough, before the world could reach in again. I chose the evening. I chose the words. I even, God help me, practiced them to my chipped blue cup like a fool. And then, the morning of the evening I had chosen, the thick envelope came from Camille's lawyers. And the whole careful world we had built in that gallery, one held breath at a time, cracked straight down the middle, and I did not get to say it first after all. I have always regretted that. It is the only thing in this whole story I would change. It came on a gray Monday, in an envelope thick enough that I knew before she opened it. Camille had found a flaw in Margarethe's will. A contested clause. A question of who the collection truly, legally belonged to. She would tie the whole estate up in court for years. Unless, the letter said, in the soft language lawyers use for threats, certain matters could be resolved privately between old friends. I watched Ondine read it standing at the window, and I watched the exact moment she understood. Because Camille was not really fighting for the art. She had simply found the one thing Ondine could not bear to lose, and she had reached for it the only way she knew how. Through the law, through the estate, through everything except the truth. And Ondine, who had spent 15 years learning to want only what she was allowed to keep, went, for the first time since I had known her, completely and terribly still. She told me to go. That night, behind a closed door, for the first time without any care at all, Ondine Sarraut told me to leave her. Take Camille's offer, she said. The better job, the safer life. Get clear of this before it ruins you the way these things have always ruined the people I love. She said it flat and certain, like she was reading it from her ledger. But her thumb was pressed white against her grandmother's ring. And I had spent 2 months cataloging this woman. And I knew exactly what it cost her to stand there and push me toward the door. She was trying to be sent away before she could be taken. She was trying to lose me on purpose, gently, because she had learned that losing on purpose hurts a single degree less than losing by surprise. So I did the hard thing instead of the easy one. I crossed the room. I closed the 8 inches at last, the 8 inches we had held sacred for a month, and I did not let her carry it alone. You do not get to decide what I'm willing to lose, I told her. You wrote me into a book once without asking. Let me choose to stay in it. Her composure broke then, just a little, just enough. Not tears. Ondine does not cry. But something in her face came undone. Some long-locked thing, and she said very quietly, "No one has ever chosen to stay." And I said, then you have never once been worth choosing until now, which is the cruelest kind thing I have ever said to anyone. And she understood it exactly the way I meant it, which is to say as a vow. And then she did the thing that no one, not Camille, not Pernille, not the lawyers, certainly not me, saw coming. She did not settle. She did not trade the collection or her pride or me. 3 days later, she called a press conference in that marble gallery with the rain coming down the tall windows behind her, and she gave Margarethe's entire collection to the city. Every painting, every sculpture, the small Vermeer she had written into her own ledger of things to keep. All of it donated on a single unbreakable condition, that it be shown publicly, forever, under Margarethe Sarraut's name, free to anyone who walked in. You cannot win a lawsuit over who owns a thing that no longer belongs to anyone. Overnight, Camille's claim turned to smoke. There was nothing left to fight for. There was only a gift and a name on a wall, and an empty gallery where a fortune used to hang. It cost her the one thing she had spent her entire life learning how to do, which was to keep. I found her afterward in the emptied gallery, alone, standing in the center of the marble floor among the pale rectangles on the walls where the paintings used to hang, the museum crates already carried out. She looked smaller in that empty room and somehow younger. 15 years of careful keeping finally set down. I asked her why. Why give it all away? The whole inheritance. Everything Margarethe had hoarded for 70 years. And she turned to me in the cold, echoing room, and she said the thing I will hear in my head until the day I die. Because I finally found the one thing, she said, that I would rather hold than own. The room was very quiet. Outside, for the first time in weeks, the rain had finally stopped, and the first real light in days came through the tall windows and lay across the marble floor in a long pale bar between us. She crossed it slowly. She stopped close enough that I had to tip my head back to hold her eyes, and her hand came up to the side of my face the way you reach for something you decided about a long, long time ago and have only now, at last, been given permission to touch. Her thumb moved once at my cheekbone. Not the ring this time. Me. May I? She said, which, from the coldest woman in the city, was the gentlest and most frightening thing I had ever been asked. I said yes. She kissed me in the empty gallery, once, slow. The way you turn a page you've been waiting your whole life to turn. Her hand stayed at my jaw. Mine found the lapel of her coat and held on. It was not the kiss of a woman taking a thing she had decided to keep. It was the kiss of a woman who had given everything else away precisely so that this, the one thing, could finally belong to no ledger at all. Not hers, not Camille's, not even her grandmother's long, cold reach. When she drew back, the millimeter at the corner of her mouth was there. Fuller than a millimeter now. Fuller than I had ever earned it. There you are, she said softly, as if she had been looking for me a very long time, and only just now in an empty room finally found me. Camille sent one last note weeks later. Just a single line in her elegant hand. You always did know how to pick the things worth keeping. I think she meant it as a defeat. I have decided to take it as a blessing. She owns her gallery across the river still, and when we pass on the street now, we nod. Two women who once wanted the same impossible thing, and only one of us was given it. I do not gloat. I would not dare. I know exactly how rare it is and how close I came to being the one who walked away nodding. The difference between us in the end was very small. She tried to take. Ondine learned, at 34 in an empty room, how to be taken. That is the whole story. That is the only thing that ever separates the people who get to keep love from the people who only get to want it. We live in the South now, part of the year, in the house with the olive trees that used to be only a line in a ledger of things she meant to keep. The collection hangs in the city under Margarethe's name. And sometimes we go and stand in front of the small Vermeer she gave away, the one she had written down for herself, and she holds my hand in the public gallery where anyone can see, and does not let go. She still touches her grandmother's ring when she is deciding something. But she reaches for me first now in the mornings, before she is even all the way awake, her hand crossing the white linen to find mine, certain like a thing she no longer has to decide at all. There is a cream leather book on the shelf by the window in the southern house. She gave it to me the day we left the city, empty, every page blank. "You may write in it," she said, "whatever you intend to keep." I have only ever written one thing in it, on the very first page, in my own careful cataloger's hand. Her name. And underneath it, the 4 words she gave me in a cold gallery on the night this whole story turned. The night I found myself written between a Klimt and a sapphire and decided for once in my life to stay on the page. "You can't unsee it," she told me then. No, I never have. I have cataloged 10,000 beautiful things in my life and let every one of them go. Her I keep. Her I chose. And she at last chose me back.